cut off my toxic in-laws after they sabotaged my family and turned my daughter against me. They lied to her a lot, but after what I did, they're losing their minds and blowing up my phone. I am 44 years old, female, and have been married to my spouse for about 20 years. My husband Jeremy and I met through friends while in college. He was in a different field and was quite gregarious, extroverted, whereas I was more shy and quiet. So I was wary of dating him when he initially asked me out, but he was quite constant. So I agreed, and we stayed together throughout our college years. Everything about our relationship was ideal, except that his parents didn't like me. Actually, not liking me is a quite polite way of putting it. They despise me. He introduced me to his family after we had been together for a year, and it took so long because he had warned me that his parents were difficult to cope with, and he needed to prepare all of us for our first meeting. I had already introduced him to my family after we had been dating for a few months since I truly liked him, and my family appeared to get along well with him. He was kind and enjoyable to be around, and they had no problems about him. When I first met his parents, though, things were drastically different. When I initially visited their residence, there was no sense of warmth or friendliness, and everything was very official. They scarcely smiled at me, and even when they spoke to me, I had the impression that I was being interviewed for a job and that they were not simply conversing with me. I was apprehensive, and I tried not to talk too much since I didn't want them to realize I was in service and make a big mess of myself. Jeremy came from a totally different type of family, which was unfamiliar to me, so I felt intimidated. They were wealthy, without a doubt, but I believe they were also closed off, and they did not like the fact that I did not fit in. They were quite cold towards me. The first time we met, dinner at their house was a really unpleasant experience for me. I couldn't even tell if I had made a good first impression on them because they were so difficult to read, and I went home with no notion if they liked me or not. But I think I shouldn't have worried because it became evident to me over the next few years. My family is really down to earth. We do not come from the same social class as my in-laws. My parents own a hair salon together, which may not be the most glamorous job, but it paid the bills while I was growing up, and I am proud of my parents. They are the reason my sister and I are educated and able to work in the careers we want. So I find it pretty motivating, but I believe my in-laws would find it embarrassing. My father-in-law is a well-known divorce lawyer, and I had heard about him several times before meeting Jeremy. He even ran several advertisements throughout the city and owned his own law company. Needless to say, he was well off and served affluent clients. But instead of being humble, he and my mother-in-law were snooty and looked down on me. They clearly never said it to my face before marriage, but I knew I wasn't an idiot. Jeremy and I visited them about once a month, and every time I tried to win them over and blend in with them, I transformed into a completely different person, simply to make them like me. But it never worked, and I think they could see right through me. And Jeremy was the one who informed me that I didn't have to go visit them with him, or work so hard to make them like me, since it didn't matter to him whether they liked me or not. What mattered was that he loved me, and his parents' thoughts wouldn't change that. Knowing that made me relax a little, and I resolved to keep my distance from them because they had been nothing but antagonistic toward me. Every time I visited them with Jeremy, I felt uneasy around them. So, that was it. However, I believe that my decision to quit trying to make them like me made them despise me even more than they already did. And every time we met after that, they would blatantly disregard me, which was difficult to notice. They also met my parents at our graduation ceremony, which was really unpleasant. We introduced our families for the first time that day, and they were even worse to my parents than they were to me, which made me feel very insulted. I could tell Jeremy was embarrassed by the way his parents were behaving with mine, and I knew that later on he took them aside and really tore into them because the way things had gone between our families had been so bad, and my parents were visibly upset. That was the day I discovered they might have the money, but they lacked any kind of human decency or civility, and they were far from as smart and polished as they pretended in public. I had previously been intimidated by them, but after that, I began to dislike them and refused to associate with them. After we graduated, I told Jeremy that I really wanted to be with him, but I couldn't stand his parents, especially after what happened at the graduation ceremony and how nasty they were to my parents. So he told me not to worry about it because he had spoken with his parents, who had promised him that they would try to be better and accept me and my family. I was skeptical, but I stuck with him because, despite his parents, I loved him and still do. At 25, Jeremy decided to propose to me. We'd been living together since we graduated from college, and both he and I had decent jobs. We were doing well for ourselves, and now was the perfect time to marry. So I said yes and didn't look back. Everyone was happy for us, except for my in-laws. They did not speak to anyone at the engagement party and simply stood in a corner with a sour expression. But by then, I was used to them attending family events that I would host but never attempting to participate in, and I knew it was all a requirement for them. I was fine with it, however. It didn't matter what they thought of me anymore because I was engaged to the man I adored, which was enough. I didn't need their stamp of approval. So in the months leading up to the wedding, I didn't think about anyone or anything except the wedding, and I was extremely busy. My parents paid for the venue and my dress, and I expected my in-laws to cover the rest of the costs. I obviously did not discuss it with them, but Jeremy had, and they had already agreed to it. However, about a month before the wedding, Jeremy came home angry and told me that we would have to arrange for the remainder of the wedding funds ourselves because he had decided to cut off communication with his parents. When I asked him why he would do such a thing, he explained that they were attempting to get me to sign a prenuptial agreement before the wedding, which included many clauses that would be extremely offensive to me, for example. It required me to disclose not only every detail about my financial situation, such as my property, assets, and so on, but also everything about my parents' finances. I thought that was ridiculous because I was the one getting married. My parents had nothing to do with any of it. In addition, the agreement stated that if my in-laws died while we were still married, I would not receive any inheritance and would not be able to contest it. But the cherry on top was that they wanted me to agree that if we divorced, all of the joint assets that we had purchased during our marriage would go to Jeremy, leaving me with nothing. I would also be ineligible for any form of alimony, maintenance settlement, or whatever you want to call it. If our marriage ended and we had children together, I would not receive any child support, even if I had full custody of them. It was a crazy, one-sided agreement that no one in their right mind would ever consider. Jeremy told me that his parents were trying to force him to sign it before the wedding, most likely in an underhanded attempt to get me to leave him. But sadly, he was able to see through them, and it didn't work. They had told him that they had just set up these paperwork to ensure that I was not pursuing his money or inheritance, and that if I wasn't a gold digger, I would have no problem signing it. I believe they mistook me for a fool, because the only person who would have no problem signing such a prenup would be an idiot, and I was not one. But anyway, after that we had no contact with his parents, and it was great. Our wedding went really well, and we were pretty blissful after that. I was quite relieved that his parents were no longer a part of our lives, and they did not make any attempts to get back to Jeremy, or even try to talk to him anymore after that. I guess their egos were bruised, that we had decided to stay with each other, and they did not succeed in breaking us apart. They did not reach out to us after we announced our first pregnancy, or even after I gave birth to my daughter, and neither did they reach out during the second. Jeremy and I have 2 children now, and things have been great. Our daughter Ellie is 16, and our son Kyle is 12. We are a happy family, but Ellie has been going through a bit of a teenage angst phase and has been rebelling. Her behavior has actually put a lot of strain on our relationship because even though I can understand the teenage desire to stray away from your parents and experiment with your life, I still find it very difficult to let go of the control that most parents want. I'm just really worried about her because she has been struggling at school and I don't see her trying to do anything about it, because all she does is gossip from the phone and I hardly ever see her trying to study. I really want her to do well in life, but every time I talk to her she just blows off and it inevitably ends in a fight. It's just classic teenage behavior, and I know that she's going to come back to me. But for now, we are going to be at loggerheads for a while, at least until she grows up a little bit. I know she still loves me, and obviously I love her more than anything in the world, but we are just in a really difficult phase right now, and I know that we can get through it. Obviously, Jeremy has been really helpful during this time, and I think it's mostly him and Kyle kind of trying to keep the peace in the house. But yes, things have been tense between Ellie and me, and I have been trying my best. And we do have certain moments of love and affection like any other parent does with a child. Unfortunately, there has also been a lot of tension between the two of us. We are trying to work through it and navigate these new territories because we are both learning as we go. And speaking of parents, Jeremy also reconnected with them a couple of months ago after his father suffered from a massive cardiac arrest. His mother told him that he might have lost his life, and that led to his decision to reconcile with his parents because both of them are nearing 70 and he does not want to end things on bad terms with them. I was supportive of that decision because at the end of the day, no matter how they are as people, they are still his parents. And I know that he misses them. So I told him that I did not have any concerns with him attempting to mend his relationship with his parents, and maybe eventually even I would think about it. But for now, I thought it was enough that he was attempting to reestablish his relationship with them, and I did not want to dig into it at the moment. I already had a lot on my plate with work and my relationship with my daughter, so I was not wanting to take on extra duty and start attempting to create a relationship with my in-laws as well. So we decided that he would try to keep in touch with him and visit him, at least twice a month because he was busy as well, and make sure that they were doing all right. I did not have to be a part of it, and on the days that he would be visiting his parents, I could stay at home and watch the kids. I was cool with that because it was only fair. This has been going on for the past 7 months, maybe, and recently he told me that he wanted to introduce the children to his parents. This was a major shift because ever since they were born, they had never even met their grandparents on their father's side. They had met my parents and had spent a lot of time with them, but never my in-laws. They'd always been informed that their paternal grandparents didn't want anything to do with our family, and it was true. They had pushed us to our limits, particularly me, and we had only answered by shutting them off. I didn't notice anything wrong with it. So introducing our children to their grandparents on their father's side was a big deal and a crucial step. So obviously Jeremy needed to confer with me first. He told me that his parents had been trying to convince him to bring the kids over for months, and he had been putting it off, but now he felt it was finally time. So he was chatting to me about it. I pondered about it for a few days before deciding that it was fine with me because Jeremy thought so. I trusted his judgment, and I was fine with it. So I gave it the green light. And last weekend, he was scheduled to take Kyle and Ellie to see their grandparents. They were also extremely excited about it because it was such a big occasion. But Kylie got a terrible bad cold a few days before he was set to depart, and he was unable to leave the house because I didn't want him infecting others. So it was only Ellie who went to her grandparents, which I am grateful for since when she returned, she had been thoroughly brainwashed and had turned against me. She was only meant to spend a few hours at their home, but when Jeremy returned, he was alone. He informed me that Ellie got along with her grandparents like a house on fire, and they had asked to spend the weekend with him because it was their first meeting, and they wanted to make up for lost time, so he couldn't say no. Even Ellie stated that she wanted to stay because she did not want to leave her grandparents' large house. I couldn't blame her either. Her grandparents lived like kings, and we had a nice but regular existence in comparison, so it was only natural for her to desire a taste of that. I was not pleased with it, but it had already been completed. I didn't say anything because I didn't want to cause a problem. However, when Ellie returned home with Jeremy on Sunday evening, her attitude toward me had shifted 180 degrees, and she was acting as if I was her arch-enemy or something. For the next few days, she refused to speak to me normally and would not even look me in the eye when she spoke or when I asked her questions. I even tried to talk to her about her behavior and ask her why she was acting the way she was, and she said it was nothing, but I knew she was ignoring me and acting as if I wasn't even in the same room when she was home. I just knew something had changed since she returned home from her grandparents' house, and I knew they were to blame. I discussed it with Jeremy, and he stated that he believed something had happened at school. But even when she fought with her friends, she never acted like that with me. I knew my in-laws were involved, but I couldn't precisely blame them without first confirming it, because I didn't want to appear as if someone was attempting to harm Jeremy's relationship with his parents. However, evidence that this was true landed into my lap. 2 days ago, I went to Ellie's room to borrow her phone charger, but then, while looking for it, her journal dropped from under her pillow to the floor. And it was not the correct thing to do, but I knew she kept a rather complete record of her life, so I decided to have a look to see why she was acting that way towards me. I knew it wasn't right, but I needed to figure it out. So I flipped through the pages to find the most recent entries and began reading through them. I turned to the date when she had been visiting her grandparents, and there were nearly 4 pages detailing how her grandparents had been filling her head with all kinds of nonsense about me. Apparently, they had told her that I was to blame for the fact that she hadn't seen them in years. They gave her a lot of lies, and she believed them because we were already going through a hard period, as I told you. They took advantage of this. They knew we were having trouble since Jeremy casually mentioned it to them on a previous visit, and they decided to utilize the chance to put a wedge between me and Ellie. They had been successful because Ellie now felt I was the one who had ruined Jeremy's connection with his parents all those years ago. They had informed her that I had pushed them to disconnect, and that their only error was implying that Jeremy and I would move closer to them after marriage. I don't like that. And I decided to take their money but not let my husband to see his parents. They actually informed her that they had paid for the place we lived in and covered all of our costs before we married. Apparently, I had been living off their money until deciding to cut connections with them because Jeremy got a terrific job and I no longer needed them. They presented me as the quintessential gold digger, and their falsehoods were so persuasive that my daughter eventually believed them. After reading those pages, I burst into tears because she had written in her diary that she could no longer look at me the same way and found it impossible to believe she was my daughter. I called my spouse and sent him the papers. I was quite heartbroken and upset. I informed him that if he ever went to see his parents again, I would file for divorce, and he was as startled as I was, telling me that I didn't have to worry about anything. He would fix everything for me and then hang up. Since that day, things have been quite stressful, with his parents blaming me for cutting them off yet again. Jeremy and I did address all of this with Ellie, but she was upset that I had read her diary and refused to speak to me. I've tried, but it's not functioning, and we have no idea what to do right now. And as if that wasn't horrible enough, my in-laws are continually reminding me that I'm the evil guy here. They have somehow obtained my phone number and email address, and they continue to send me messages from numerous accounts and numbers, accusing me of ruining everyone's lives. They are calling me egoistic and self-centered and cursing me out, which is quite unfortunate for me right now because I am already going through a lot. I don't need this either. They believe they did nothing wrong and accuse me of being selfish because I was always the one who caused Jeremy to stop seeing his parents, causing their family to split up. It's been incredibly challenging. I'm not sure if I did the right thing when I told Jeremy that I don't want him to see his parents anymore, or when I told my husband that he isn't allowed to meet his parents since they tried to brainwash my daughter into turning against me. Update 1. I told Jeremy what I was going through. As most of you mentioned, chatting to him was quite helpful. I avoided it because he was already angry due of his parents, and I didn't want to add to it. Furthermore, I was already feeling like a burden on the family, so I didn't want to talk to him and make myself feel much worse because I was terrified. Which is ridiculous because I've been married to him for 2 decades and should know him better. He's my husband, and he's the only person I can really talk to about these issues. So I told him what was bothering me, and the first thing he did was hold me for 5 minutes and assure me that everything would be all right. I think I sobbed for at least a half hour after that since it was so wonderful and reminded me of why I married him. He always knew exactly how to make me feel better. And I'm not sure how I got so lucky, but regardless, we had a conversation. I told him about the messages his parents had been sending me, and he said he would stop it. I didn't have to worry about it. Then I told him that I was sorry that my daughter was no longer speaking to me. And that's where we kind of ran into a snag, because it was a very delicate and sensitive matter, all things considered. I had actually invaded her privacy, which was not acceptable, but what she was doing was also inappropriate, and it was a difficult situation to navigate. We eventually decided to talk to her, but Jeremy would do the majority of the talking because she was more likely to respond to him than to me at the moment. So that's the plan right now, and I'm just hoping it works because she's been ignoring me for nearly a week. It is extremely difficult for me to deal with as a mother. Update 2. Hello, guys. So Jeremy and I finally had that conversation with Ellie, and we've decided that she and I will try therapy and see a counselor. Jeremy served as a sort of mediator during our conversation, which greatly aided our communication. She told me that she always feels like I'm trying to control her life, which makes her feel like a lesser person, which is why she always goes out of her way to do the exact opposite of what I tell her. Kind of like the whole reverse psychology thing. Furthermore, she has enough issues at school, such as drama with her friends and the fact that she has really bad grades in a couple of subjects, and I'm just exacerbating the situation by being overbearing at home. So I tried to understand where she was coming from and told her that I was only looking out for her because I wanted her to succeed in life, and when she didn't listen to me, I felt like she didn't respect me, which made me feel terrible about myself. I also told her that the fact that her grandparents were able to make her doubt me so easily bothered me, and I was disappointed by it. She apologized to me and explained that the only reason she believed him was because, subconsciously, she was looking for an excuse to hurt me because she was angry about everything, and I suppose that makes sense. However, we cannot solve it on our own, so we need to speak with a professional, because no matter how much I love my husband, he is currently unqualified for this position. We are actively working to repair our relationship, and I hope it works out for us. Until then, Kylie and Jeremy are responsible for keeping the family on track. But fingers crossed, everything will be fine in no time. Hello there, this is Update 3. A lot of you have asked for an update on the situation, so here it is. So it's been nearly 4 months since my last update, and things have been going fairly well. Ellie and I have regular therapy sessions every weekend. She and I are attempting to improve our relationship, and I believe we are succeeding because our fights have decreased significantly, and the pressure on my husband and son to keep us from exploding all the time has been lifted. It was not fair to them, but they handled us admirably, and I am so proud of their emotional maturity. We've also decided to spend more time together as a family, and we're attempting to schedule at least one family getaway per month. I believe it is beneficial for us to bond because it improves our overall mental health. And the best part is that Ellie is doing much better in school now. Her grades have significantly improved, and I believe it is because I no longer nag her all the time, and she now works hard on her own without my prompting. So that's fantastic, and I am so proud of her. My son is doing well, and both of my children have given me many reasons to be proud of them. My husband and I are also wonderful and in love. Despite their best efforts, his parents were unable to end our relationship. The messages stopped a few days after I informed Jeremy because he threatened to expose them on social media and even press charges against them if they did not stop sending messages. And it worked. It caused them to stop. And now we're back to never speaking to them again, so it's all good for now. I can't complain. Life is great.